Hello everyone, I am Assistant Professor Jayendra Patel, and in this video we are going to learn about the force measurement using the elastic elements. This is the second lecture on the force measurement for this particular subject called mechanical measurement and the metrology. So let us start with these contents. So in this specific lecture we are going to learn about the spring scale. Then we will be learning about the cantilever beam load cell, and then after we will be learning about the another variety of load cell which is known as the cylindrical load cell, and in the end we will be understanding the proving ring. So basically all these four elements are based on the elastic members used for the force measurement. So let us start with the force measurement using the elastic elements. Now, basically when we talk about the elastic elements, we talk about the springs, we talk about the varieties of rods, we talk about the cantilever beams, we talk about the simply supported beams because they are also the part of the elastic members. We can talk about the rings, varieties of rings are available. We can talk about the bellows. Okay, so these all are basically available as elastic members. Okay, so these all are basically the elastic members. We are not going to talk about each and every one, but we are going to talk about the basic or say essential elastic members that can help us to measure the forces. So very first member is a spring. So let us talk about the spring or say spring scales. Now the use of the spring is a very simple. Whenever we are having a free spring, if I keep one end of the spring fixed and second end free, now what I will do, whenever I apply the load on this second free end, what will happen? Some deflection will happen or say some expansion will happen. Now if I measure this particular expansion from this point, whenever I apply the load, it moves over here. So this expansion is basically how much this is indicated as X. Now if we observe in a specific way, we can say that whatever the load I have applied, based on that this deflection has occurred. Okay, so this is what I can say. So whenever I remove this proportionality constant, I can write down this equation something like this: F is equal to K into X. Now this proportionality constant K is known as the spring constant. This is also known as the stiffness of the spring, which is actually fixed for each spring. Okay, so whenever we manufacture a spring, a stiffness is fixed for a limited point of the expansion. Okay, so we can keep this particular value K as fixed. Now we know that the force is directly proportional to the deflection. So what we can do, by applying numbers of forces, we can find out that for what number of force how much deflection is occurring, and based on that we can calibrate the whole scale. Okay, and by using this scale we can directly measure the force with the help of the spring. And on this same principle, the scales are made and calibrated such a way that they can directly be used as a spring weighing measurement. Okay, so these are some of the examples available for the spring weights or say spring scales. So this is one of the best example for the spring scale. Other than that, the spiral scales or say spiral springs are also used for as a spring scale, which is available over here. You can see this is one of the best example where the spiral scale is used as a spring scale. So this is the first variety where we are using the elastic member, a spring, for measurement of the forces in an indirect way. The second option that is available to us is the cantilever beam load cell. Now, the basic principle of operation for the cantilever beam load cell is that whenever the bending moment is developed in the beam, it is directly proportional to the applied force. Now over here, let me explain you in a very simple way. This is a cantilever beam available. The very first end of the cantilever beam is fixed over here. You can observe that this is the fixed end. And the second end of the cantilever beam is available freely. So whenever I will apply any kind of force on the free end of the cantilever beam, what will happen? Very first thing, some deflection will happen. That means this free end will move in a downward direction as I have applied force in a downward direction. So I can say this is the deflection delta. For this deflection, I know how much value will be there because I know that this deflection is directly proportional to the force, and the deflection at the free end is given by this specific equation, which says that delta is equal to 4FL cube divided by EBT square, where I can see that the delta is directly proportional to the force. This is the first thing where I can measure the value of delta, and based on that I can find out the value of force. How much force can be applied, or say how much force is applied, can be measured by measuring the value of deflection at the free end. This is the first way I can use the cantilever beam. But parallelly, I also know that whenever the force is applied, a strain is developed at the fixed end. Now this fixed end can be measured over here. The strain developed at the fixed end can be measured in this specific area. Now the question arises how to measure this specific strain. Now such kind of strain can be measured using the gadget, or say the instrument that is called as the strain gauge. Now a strain gauge principle is also a very unique principle. I will just explain you in the next slide, but just try to understand this strain that is developed over here is also a known value, because I can identify this value using this specific equation. The strain at the fixed end is known as epsilon is equal to 6FL divided by EBT square. Okay, so whenever I will apply the force at the free end, okay, the beam will develop a strain at the fixed end which is actually directly proportional to the force. Okay, and this is the basic principle of the working for the cantilever beam. Whenever I can measure the epsilon, okay, whenever I can measure the value of the strain, I can say that how much force is basically acting at the free end. Okay, because both are directly proportional. Now the question arises how this strain gauge basically works. So the working of strain gauge is a very simple working. What is a basic strain gauge? Let me just explain you. This is the figure of the strain gauge. Now as you can observe that there is a whole grid of the soldered tabs is available. So these are basically the soldered wires which are going something like this. Okay, so this is the whole grid available. Now what this specific grid does, now these cables or this material is such that a minor change, or say minor change in the dimensions of this grid actually changes the resistance of these wires. Okay, so whenever I will apply any kind of potential over here, or say any voltage over here, what will happen whenever I try to expand, or say whenever I will expand or contract this grid, the resistance of the whole grid will change, and the output that is available over here will reflect that particular data. This is how the strain gauge will work. Okay, now this kind of strain gauges are kept on this kind of cantilever beam. This is the cantilever beam where one end is fixed. This is the fixed end. The second end is free. Now try to understand how the strain gauge will work with the load cell. Now whenever I will apply the load on the free end, what will happen? Basically over here, this upper part of the load cell will get expanded, something like this, okay, because there is a bending moment generated, okay, and this particular part will also move something like this, okay. I'm showing somewhat bigger expansion so you can understand how this will occur. Now ultimately what is happening over here, the strain gauge has been fixed on this beam. These are the 4 strain gauges which are fixed on these beams, okay. So in this case, the strain gauges that are available on the upper part of the cantilever beam will be subjected to expansion, will be subjected to tension, we can say, okay. So this strain gauge will be subjected to tension. This strain gauge will also try to expand. On the other side, the lower strain gauges will be subjected to tension, or say contraction, sorry, they are subjected to the contraction. So they will be contracted, okay. Now all these 4 strain gauges are actually connected with a bridge circuit which is known as the Wheatstone bridge circuit, okay, Wheatstone bridge circuit, and this Wheatstone bridge circuit will give us the output in terms of the voltage. Ultimately what is happening over here, just try to understand. Very first thing, whenever I have applied the load, what will happen? The upper part of the load cell is subjected to tension. This part will be expanded. The lower part of the whole strain gauge is subjected to the contraction, okay. So ultimately the same thing will be applied on the strain gauges, okay. The same thing will be applied to the strain gauges. So basically R1, this particular first part and second part will be subjected to the expansion or tension. The lower R4 and R3, the lower strain gauges will be subjected to the contraction, and ultimately they all are connected to the Wheatstone bridge circuit, and whatever the output that I am getting in the Wheatstone bridge circuit will basically show me how much force I have applied. So first of all, force will be converted to the expansion or say contraction. That expansion and contraction will be converted into the change in the resistance, and that change into the resistance will be converted into the change in the potential of the electricity, and that particular thing will give me the final output, okay. And as we understood in the very first chapter, that the more conversion, the more accurate the value output that we are going to get, okay. So this is how the whole cantilever beam load cell can work. Now this is the combination of strain gauge and the cantilever beam, okay. Now such kind of cantilever beams can be replaced using the various kinds of things also. So there is one more load cell which basically works with the cylinder, okay. So the basic principle is going to be same. Whenever the stress is applied on any kind of body, what will happen? The body will get deformed, okay. The same thing will happen in this case of the cylinder, okay. Whenever I apply the load on the cylinder, okay, what will happen? Due to this particular load, the vertical part, this particular dimension of this cylinder will get reduced, and the diametrical part, or say diameter of this cylinder, will try to get expand, and this particular deformation or say deflection is basically directly proportional to the applied force. So if we can measure such kind of deflection using the strain gauges, we can actually measure the force that is getting applied on this kind of cylinders, okay. So this is how the load cell on this specific cylinder will work, okay. Now the resistance strain gauge basically works on the principle of the resistance of the wire conductor that we have learned in the last session, okay. Now the changes in the resistance over here will be defined in terms of the relation with the strain or say applied force, okay. So this change in the resistance can be measured by the Wheatstone bridge circuit in terms of the voltages, as we learned in the last session, okay. Now let us understand how the whole this load cell will work. The very first thing, a strain gauge load cell basically applied on this specific cylinder. Okay, so this is the steel cylinder or aluminum cylinder. A strain gauge load cell will be applied over here. Now over here there are total 4 identical strain gauges. Okay, the strain gauges are actually completely bonded on the steel cylinder, remember that. So whatever the dimensional changes that will occur on the cylinder, steel cylinder or aluminum cylinder, the same changes will occur in the strain gauges. Okay, now over here the strain gauge R1 and R4, this specific strain gauge which is available over here vertically, the R1 and R4 are basically along the direction of the applied load. Okay, whatever the load I will apply, the strain gauge will directly absorb that particular load because they are along the direction. And the R2 and R3, these 2 strain gauges are basically attached in a circumferential manner. You can observe that they are available in a circumferential manner. Okay, so basically they are at the right angle to the strain gauges R1 and R4. Now these all four strain gauges are connected electrically by the 4 limbs of the Wheatstone bridge circuit. The Wheatstone bridge circuit looks something like this. Okay, now whenever there is a no load condition, all the 4 strain gauges or say this strain gauge resistance devices are same. Okay, so there will be no voltage potential difference or say there will be no indication of output in the Wheatstone bridge circuit because all 4 strain gauges are actually identical in the dimensions. So the resistance of the all 4 strain gauges will be same. But whenever the load is applied over here, I am applying the compressive force. You can observe that I am applying the compressive load. So basically whenever the compressive load is applied, the vertical gauges R1 and R4, you can observe them over here. The R1 and R4 goes under the compression. Okay, they will go under the compression or we can say the negative strain. Therefore, the resistance of these two R1 and R4 will decrease and the circumferential gauges that are available over here R2 and R3. Now these 2 gauges will go under the tension because as I told you the diameter of the cylinder will increase in case of this kind of forces. So basically they will undergo the tension or say the positive strain will be developed. Therefore the resistance of R2 and R3 will increase. Now these changes in the resistance of the strain gauges causes the unbalance in the Wheatstone bridge circuit and ultimately the output will be produced and that particular output will be directly proportional to the applied forces. So whatever the force I will apply over here will be directly represented as the voltage output of the Wheatstone bridge circuit. This is how the whole load cell will work or say strain gauge section will work. Now basically there are strain gauges are very simple and very we can say very fast to use. That's why in most of the cases such kind of strain gauges are basically used, and so strain gauges based load cells are also very popular in this case. So there are numbers of advantages available. Very first thing, this kind of strain gauges are very small and compact because they are very small electrical devices. That's why they are having its own advantage. Secondly, it has a very fast response against the variation of the load. Whenever the load will be dynamic, in that case it will try to show the intermediate or say we can say instant results using the strain gauges. Thirdly, they are basically very suitable for measurement of the transient or say non-steady forces. Whenever the forces are continuously changing, they are basically very suitable for the measurement. And lastly, it can be measured the compressive as well as the tensile load. Okay, so we can measure the compressive as well as the tensile load both in the case of the load cell. Okay, so these are some of the very basic advantages. That's why the load cells are very useful in many ways. Okay, the last device that we are going to learn today is the proving ring. Now in the proving ring, it basically consists of a circular ring which has the known precise diameter. This is the ring. Okay, normally this is the ring which has the known precise diameter, and the projection lungs are provided on this particular ring. Okay, so these are the projection lungs which are available on this particular ring. Now, what basically occurs that actually help us to measure using the proving ring? Let us understand the basic principle of the proving ring. Whenever I apply the load on this particular proving ring, okay, whenever I will apply the load on this particular proving ring, what will occur? The diameter of this proving ring will change. Initially, the diameter of the proving ring is going to be same from all the sides, but whenever I apply the load, the vertical dimension or say vertical diameter of the proving ring will reduce and this horizontal diameter of the proving ring will increase. Okay, and this reduction of the diameter of the proving ring is basically directly proportional to the application of the forces. Okay, so whatever the force I will apply, it will be identical to the changes in the dimensions. Okay, so this particular change in the dimension, which is the reducing dimension, can be measured by a various ways. Over here, this is the dial indicator which actually measures the change in the dimension. Over here, a micrometer screw is used which will measure the change in the dimension. So there are numbers of options available by which I can actually measure the change in the dimension of the proving ring. Okay, and in the manufacturing industry, the proving ring is one of the most common instrument which is used to measure the large forces. Okay, we can measure the 2 kilonewton forces to the 2 meganewton forces using the proving ring, as it is one of the most precise instrument available for the measurement of the large forces. Now, let us understand how to measure using this particular proving ring. You have understood that what are the things available. The proving ring is there, the projection lungs are available. Okay, then after, the measuring devices are available. A dial indicator can be used as a measuring device. Over here, the micrometer screw is used as a measuring device. Okay, so there are total 3 parts available. And now let us understand how to use this proving ring. So initially what we will do, initially we will apply no load on the proving ring. Okay, so whenever there is a no load condition, this particular dial indicator, if there is a dial indicator or if there is a micrometer screw, it will show some reading. Okay, so this is a read available and this is the micrometer screw available. Now the gap of this read and the micrometer screw is filled. Okay, so there should be no gap between the read and the micrometer screw. Initially, at initial levels, this thing will give us the reading number 1. Okay, so reading number 1 is taken at the initial level without application of the load. Now normally if this proving ring is calibrated, the reading number 1 will be 00. Okay, so there will be no reading on the micrometer screw, or if you are having a dial gauge, there will be no reading on the dial gauge. Okay, or we can calibrate this value to 0. Now next what will happen, we will apply compressive load on the projection lungs. Okay, so ultimately over here the load will be applied. If you are using this kind of proving ring, in this case over here these are known as the projection lungs, over here the load will be applied. Now as the load will be applied, what will happen, the dimension of the proving ring will change. That means the vertical diameter of the proving ring will decrease and the horizontal diameter of the proving ring will increase. Okay, now this decrease in the proving ring diameter can be measured using the micrometer screw. So what will happen, once again what we will do, we will actually remove the gap between the micrometer and the read. Okay, the gap between the micrometer and the read will be made 0 and that second reading will be measured. Okay, so this is the second reading, reading number 2. And ultimately the difference between reading number 1 and reading number 2 will give us the change in the dimension, of the proving ring, and that change in the dimension of the proving ring is actually calibrated against the change in the forces. So we can actually measure the force by measuring the change in the dimension of the proving ring. This is how we can use proving ring to measure the force. Okay, Now, as I told you, there are numbers of options available. Over here, this is the dial gauge available, micrometer screw available. There is one more thing available which is known as the LVDT, which we are going to learn in the next session. Okay, this can also be used to sense the movement or say changes in these particular dimensions. Now, why this probing ring is this much helpful? The very first thing, this kind of probing rings are available in a very wide range for the force measurement. Okay, so that's why these probing rings are most commonly used in the mega industries or say major industries where the higher forces are to be measured. Secondly, the probing rings are actually having very good accuracy. So we can measure these values with a very higher accuracy if we are having a precise micrometer or we are having a precise dial indicators. Nowadays there are digital indicators are also available. If you are having those precise indicators, then probing rings can provide very good accuracy. And lastly, this kind of instrument are basically having the very high output signals. Okay, so basically they will provide us the very high accuracy output signal. That's why these probing rings are very useful. Okay, so this is the end of this particular session. In this particular lecture, we learned the elastic elements and use of those elements for the force measurement. In the next session, we will be learning about the hydraulic and the pneumatic load cells, and we will be learning about the LVDT. Till then, keep learning. Have a good day.